I'm Olivia, 28 years old, an interior designer who believes in romantic love stories like in the movies. 8 years ago, I entered a relationship that felt like destiny had arranged it. His name was Victor. Victor seemed to be everything I had ever dreamed of. A man who knew how to listen, understand, and had countless things in common with me. For the first time in my life, I felt seen and appreciated for who I truly was. I opened up to Victor more than I intended, and faster than I thought. People often say if something seems too good to be true, it usually isn't. It wasn't until much later, when everything fell apart, that I realized what Victor did to me in the early stages of the relationship was love bombing, a technique of emotional manipulation by showering with affection. His gestures at that time made me ecstatic. Only in the second month of dating, Victor took me on his small boat to a deserted island. He personally prepared a sumptuous lunch, beautifully arranged right on the beach, complete with homemade limoncello. We went snorkeling together, and he found a giant seashell, giving it to me as a symbol of eternal love. Not long after, Victor took me to visit his childhood home. He showed me old photos of his deceased parents, and gave me an old toy that he said was his most precious childhood memento. In that moment, I completely believed that Victor was the one, my destiny. But then, just as quickly as it began, everything started to change. At first, it was just small things. Victor began to make sarcastic, insinuating comments about my appearance or about things I said, making me feel extremely insecure and self-conscious. He openly flirted with other women right in front of me, clearly to make me jealous. Each time I cried, and Victor would apologize, temporarily reverting to the romantic, doting person he was before. However, his anger outbursts became increasingly worse, and the time I had to spend pleading, convincing him of my love, also grew longer after each conflict. I felt exhausted, drained of energy from constantly having to prove my love, just to receive a little of the affection he had once so easily given. One afternoon, as I stepped out of the bathroom, I caught Victor browse an online dating website. When I discovered him, he showed no signs of embarrassment or guilt. On the contrary, Victor calmly said he intentionally let me see, to see if I would get jealous and try to control him again. That explanation was so shameless, I couldn't believe it. Victor was actually very bad at using computers. I remembered once when we first met, he had called me to help set up an online account to play chess. I had tried to guide him step by step on how to create a username and password on a rather complicated website. But Victor quickly lost patience and eventually just read me the username and password he wanted to use. A faint glimmer of hope sparked in my mind. I tried using that exact username and password to log into the dating website I had just seen Victor access. And then the gates of hell opened. I was able to access his account immediately. What I saw on the screen shattered my heart. Victor wasn't just flirting with other women via messages. From the content of the conversations, it was clear he had met and become inappropriately close with many of them. What hurt me most was that some conversations contained intimate, private information about me, about things Victor was not satisfied with in me. They were like knives cutting deep into my self-esteem and the love I had for him. Those words hurt me so much that I just slumped to the floor, sobbing like a child. By that point, I knew Victor wasn't perfect, knew our relationship had too many cracks. But I still stubbornly clung to the beautiful memories of the early stage, the stage where I had felt the happiest in my life. Now I had to face a harsh reality. It was all a deceitful charade. I cried for hours. When my tears dried up, the pain turned into emptiness. And then, something inside me broke. Weakness disappeared, replaced by a cold determination. I decided I had to do something, not to hold on, but to retaliate. I began my plan by creating a fake online dating profile. That was just the first of many accounts I would create later. I chose a beautiful profile picture, an attractive name, and built a perfect personal profile to attract Victor's attention. It didn't take long before I started chatting with Victor through that fake account. He was quickly drawn in. After a few days of messaging back and forth, Victor suggested meeting up. I pretended to hesitate, feigning shyness. But Victor was incredibly persistent, pleading. Finally, I reluctantly agreed to meet him at a large, crowded cafe. On the day of the date, I arrived at the cafe earlier than the scheduled time, slightly disguised with sunglasses and a scarf so Victor wouldn't recognize me. I chose a hidden corner where I could observe the entire cafe without being detected. Deep down, I still harbored a faint hope that Victor wouldn't come, that everything I had discovered was just a nightmare. 10 minutes before the appointment with the mysterious woman, I called Victor on the phone, pretending to ask where he was and if we could meet. Victor coldly replied that he couldn't meet me because he had an urgent matter to attend to. My heart sank to the pit of my stomach. All remaining hope vanished. I kept my eyes glued to the entrance of the cafe, and then, just as expected, Victor walked in. He found an empty table, sat down, and began to wait. At that moment, I felt a wave of panic rise, my heart beating fast, my breath shallow. But I managed to take a deep breath and calm myself. Initially, Victor waited patiently, but then he started to look restless, constantly checking his watch, and his eyes scanned every woman who entered the cafe. And then, as if by a twist of fate, a woman walked into the cafe. Her appearance was exactly as I had described myself in the fake dating profile. Victor immediately stood up, approached her, and started a conversation. The girl looked annoyed and refused him, but Victor stubbornly persisted. Finally, the girl couldn't keep her composure any longer and snapped at Victor to leave her alone. Rudely rejected, Victor dejectedly returned to his table, waited for about another half hour, then left in disappointment. That very afternoon, I used the fake dating account to send a message to Victor. I said that I was the woman he had tried to talk to at the cafe. I explained that I had seen him but didn't find him physically attractive. And because I lacked the courage to speak frankly in public, I had pretended not to know him. I apologized profusely for causing the misunderstanding. Victor replied that it was okay, nothing to worry about. But I knew very well, for an arrogant and narcissistic person like Victor, there was no way he could easily overlook being rejected and criticized like that. And so I continued to repeat that charade with Victor. Many more times. I created many other fake dating accounts with different types of women, but all were types I knew would definitely attract Victor's attention. Sometimes the girl would stand Victor up completely without a word of explanation. Sometimes the girl would arrange a meeting then suddenly change the schedule at the last minute, only to stand him up again. There were also times when the girl canceled the date right before the meeting time, making Victor furious but unable to do anything. At least 10 dates unfolded according to the failed script I had painstakingly arranged. Each time I silently observed Victor's reactions, seeing his confidence dwindle day by day, his confusion and frustration mounting. That was the price he had to pay. After about 10 such ordeals, I felt it was time to end this play. I had achieved my goal, making Victor taste the feeling of being toyed with, disrespected, and most importantly, the loss of faith in virtual relationships. It was time for me to officially break up with him. I chose a public place, a crowded cafe, to say goodbye. I didn't want to give Victor any chance to manipulate or cling on. I told him straight to his face that everything was over, because he was a terrible deceiver. As expected, Victor denied everything vehemently. He tried to use his familiar gaslighting tricks, blaming me for being pathologically jealous, for being the one who sabotaged the relationship. But this time, I was no longer the weak Olivia of the past. I looked Victor straight in the eye, my voice cold and full of mockery. All those failed dates? They were all arranged by me. I let that sentence slowly sink into his mind. Victor's confident expression vanished, replaced by utter shock and bewilderment. He stammered, asking how I could have done that. I just smirked, recited to him the exact username and password he had once asked me to create for him, then stood up and walked away, leaving Victor alone with the harsh truth. A few months after we broke up, Victor sent me a very long email. In it, he admitted that what I had done to him was truly ingenious. He wrote that it further proved I was the love of his life. Victor also confessed that he had completely lost interest in online dating, because now, with every new woman he met, he was both terrified and hopeful that it was me in disguise. I never replied to that email, nor to any other attempts by Victor to contact me. And to this day, years later, he occasionally still tries to send messages, emails, or even small gifts to my old address. But to me, Victor completely belongs to the past, a dark chapter that has been closed. I am not proud of what I did. Revenge did not bring me real joy, but it gave me a sense of justice, a feeling that I had regained some control after being hurt and disrespected. More importantly, it helped me realize my own worth and never allow anyone to trample on my feelings again. The virtual dating maze I created for Victor will probably haunt him for a long time. As for me, I have stepped out of that maze, stronger and ready for a new journey, a more deserving love. Justice sometimes doesn't come from courts or the judgments of others, but from the very way we confront and overcome our traumas, in our own way.